In 2025, China unveiled its answer to NVIDIA, Huawei's CloudMatrix 384, a 384-chip AI cluster glowing beneath patriotic banners and LED lights. On TV, it was victory, a technological miracle. A narrator called it the emperor of domestic AI. But behind the curtain, the power grid groaned. Hospitals reported misdiagnoses. Startups defaulted on rent trying to integrate the system. And engineers whispered, "It doesn't work." The hardware was stitched together with imported chips. The software barely held. But no one said a word because the illusion had to live. And so Huawei became a character in an old fable. The emperor walking proudly in public, draped in code no one could see. When the state needs success more than results, what happens when the truth walks into the room naked? The CloudMatrix 384 wasn't just a machine. It was a message, unveiled in Beijing beneath a banner reading technological self-reliance. The AI cluster stood as China's response to US chip sanctions. Huawei claimed it had achieved what no one thought possible. An all-domestic, high-performance alternative to NVIDIA's AI hardware. The numbers were dramatic. 384 Ascend 910C chips stacked into a single cluster. Custom-built infrastructure. Propaganda clips showed engineers smiling, cables glowing, and data flowing like light. But behind the scenes, the reality was brittle. The 910C chip at the heart of CloudMatrix, manufactured by TSMC in Taiwan, funneled through third-party vendors to skirt US restrictions. The high-bandwidth memory, sourced from Samsung, routed via Korean agents. The software, barely usable. Unlike NVIDIA's CUDA platform, supported by decades of documentation and millions of developers, Huawei's ecosystem was shallow, underfunded, and poorly maintained. Most teams had to build everything from scratch, often relying on outdated GitHub threads and internal hacks. It wasn't innovation, it was improvisation. One Beijing-based startup described their experience like this: "We spent 5 months rewriting code just to make it run. And when it finally ran, it crashed." Another called CloudMatrix a power-hungry furnace, because that's what it was. At 559 kilowatts, it consumed nearly 4 times more electricity than NVIDIA's GB200 system. Daily energy bills soared into 6 figures, just to keep the cluster alive. Still, state media praised it as a miracle. News anchors said it had beaten the blockade. One report even claimed the system outperformed NVIDIA in key domestic metrics. No definitions were given, no data was shown, and no one dared ask, because by 2025, CloudMatrix had become something untouchable, a sacred symbol. Criticize it, and you weren't just questioning technology, you were questioning the party's narrative of strength. So when systems failed, no one filed complaints. When hospitals reported diagnostic errors, the stories disappeared. And when engineers warned of inefficiencies, their budgets were pulled. Meanwhile, the illusion continued. More provinces pledged to adopt the platform. More universities held Huawei-sponsored AI patriotism competitions. More billboards went up. China's code, China's future. But the code didn't work. The future wasn't arriving. And the people closest to the machine, they could see the stitches. CloudMatrix wasn't a milestone. It was a costume, held up by silence, powered by denial, and paraded across the stage of national pride. And like in the old fable, the only ones allowed to speak were those too afraid to tell the truth. The deeper you dig into Huawei's CloudMatrix system, the more you realize this wasn't a failure of technology. It was a design built for denial. By early 2025, local governments across China were racing to install Huawei clusters in hospitals, universities, and public institutions. Not because they worked, but because they were told to. CloudMatrix wasn't optional, it was a political requirement. Part of a larger campaign to prove that China could thrive without Western tech. So whether it fit the application didn't matter. If you ran a data center, you were expected to buy one. If you taught machine learning, you were expected to use one. And if you built software, you were expected to pretend it worked. But inside the system, it didn't. Documents leaked by a Shenzhen data center showed that over 70% of compute time went unused in Huawei clusters, due to software incompatibilities, power throttling, and unstable drivers. Clients stopped submitting jobs, but the servers kept running. Why? Because turning them off would raise questions, and questions lead to audits, and audits lead to punishment. In China's state-guided economy, silence is safer than honesty. By mid-2025, the energy burden was hitting local grids. CloudMatrix needed industrial-grade power and cooling designed for high-throughput performance but rarely delivering it. In some provinces, electricity subsidies were quietly rerouted from agriculture and public housing to keep Huawei clusters online. The government called it strategic reallocation. But for the residents of small cities like Luoyang or Maoming, it meant brownouts in the summer and delayed infrastructure repairs. Still, the illusion grew. To reinforce the myth, state broadcasters staged scripted visits to data centers. Cameras panned across blinking lights and technicians typing into terminals, some not even connected to active clusters. The message, "We've arrived." But no one asked, arrived where? This wasn't innovation. It was theater. In one instance, a university AI lab held a live demo of CloudMatrix, beating NVIDIA in image recognition. Afterward, a student whispered, "They preloaded the results." He was warned not to repeat it. That's how the illusion sustains itself, not through success, but through fear. Even Huawei employees began to notice. In an internal memo leaked to international tech outlets, a senior engineer wrote, "We are no longer solving problems. We are preserving a narrative. We have become costume designers, not creators." The phrase circulated briefly on Chinese forums before disappearing. But for those on the inside, it stuck. Because that's what the project had become. A national performance, with carefully choreographed scenes, scripted victories, and a silent cast of engineers working behind the curtain. And somewhere above them, the emperor walked, still cloaked in nothing. In a startup accelerator in Chengdu, 3 founders sit in silence. Their team just failed a product demo again. Their deep learning model couldn't finish training. Not because the algorithm was wrong, but because their system, built on Huawei's CloudMatrix, kept crashing. It's not the code that's broken. It's the foundation they were forced to build on. In 2024, this startup received a National Innovation Grant. The requirement? Use Chinese-made chips and infrastructure. The logic? Strengthen the domestic tech ecosystem. The reality? Spend 6 months rebuilding everything to run on a platform no one trusts, and pray it doesn't fail during a pitch. "We didn't choose Huawei," one co-founder says. "We chose survival." And that's how it works now. Across China, startups and mid-sized tech firms are trapped in a quiet compliance game. To access government money, they must use government-blessed hardware. Even when that hardware can't compete. Even when it increases costs, slows development, and scares away international clients. But these companies don't protest. They adapt, they pretend, and they wait. Sometimes the wait is fatal. In 2025, an AI-powered logistics company in Suzhou folded after their CloudMatrix deployment collapsed under real-time routing demands. Deliveries missed, contracts canceled, investors walked. The founder wrote one line in his farewell post: "We bet on the wrong platform, but we had no other choice." This is the silent toll Huawei's illusion is taking. Not on governments, not on trade ministers, but on real businesses, real workers, real growth. Let's break down the math. Each CloudMatrix 384 unit costs 60 million yuan, around $8.2 million. That's just the hardware. Add another 20 to 40 million for customized deployment, integration, and compliance audits. The result? A machine priced out of reach for nearly every private company, unless the government steps in. And when it does, the strings are tight. Companies are required to provide usage data that demonstrates performance improvements. But when the system lags, they don't downgrade. They downgrade expectations, change the metric, redefine success. That's how business is done now. You don't sell results. You sell alignment. Meanwhile, Chinese data from the Semiconductor Industry Association paints a clearer picture. Despite hundreds of billions in investment, China's chip self-sufficiency still hovers around 15%. The rest? Imported through layers of middlemen, deniability, and risk. CloudMatrix is no different. Its core chip, manufactured by TSMC in Taiwan. Its memory modules, mostly from Samsung in South Korea. Its integration tools, based on open-source libraries copied from US and European research. In short, it's a foreign-built machine wrapped in a domestic flag. But in boardrooms across Shenzhen, Hangzhou, and Guangzhou, executives pretend otherwise. Because that's what the party needs to see. In return, they get subsidies, tax breaks, official endorsements, but not trust, not efficiency, not scale. Worse, this political theater distorts actual market demand. Real clients, banks, logistics providers, hospitals don't want CloudMatrix. They want stable, proven, cost-effective solutions. Many would still choose NVIDIA or AMD if allowed. Instead, they buy Huawei and run it quietly on backup systems, while doing real work on foreign hardware under the table. A digital dual life. One for the cameras, one for survival. In 2025, a manufacturing analytics firm in Foshan was investigated after it was discovered they were routing tasks to AWS servers in Singapore while reporting domestic AI compliance on paper. They were fined. The manager was demoted. And the real lesson was made clear. Truth is more dangerous than failure. So the business world adjusted. They learned to stage success, to stage loyalty, to stage progress, just like Huawei had taught them. In the end, CloudMatrix isn't just a bad product. It's a contagious lie, passed down the supply chain, infecting every company it touches. Not because they believe it, but because no one dares say the emperor is naked. He works the night shift in a concrete office tower in Suzhou. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead. 2 monitors glow in front of him, one showing lines of system logs, the other a frozen command prompt. His job? Keep Huawei's CloudMatrix AI cluster alive. It's not about optimization, not about performance. It's about not letting it crash during inspection. We're told to keep it warm, he says. Doesn't matter if it's working. Just don't let it die. This is the silent contract between the system and the people inside it. Maintain the illusion, or lose your job. Across China, thousands of engineers like him now work on Huawei infrastructure. Not because it's powerful, but because it's political. They were promised innovation. They're delivering maintenance. The work is brutal. Documentation is scattered. Support forums are nearly empty. Every module they build takes 2 to 3 times longer than on NVIDIA-based systems. The software ecosystem? Barely usable. If something breaks, it takes hours to isolate, days to patch, weeks to stabilize. A senior DevOps engineer in Chongqing describes it this way. We're not developers anymore. We're firefighters. He says his team spends 80% of their time fixing tools built by someone else. Tools that were rushed, under-tested, and poorly documented. The problem isn't the people. It's the politics. CloudMatrix isn't a platform built for engineers. It's a platform built for headlines. So when systems fail, no one reports it. Logs are wiped. Incident notes are rewritten. Internal wikis become memory holes. The engineers know the truth. They just learn to speak around it. We call it ghost coding, one back-end developer says. You write what the client wants to see, not what works. Even in training sessions, they're taught how to make Huawei deployments appear functional during audits. If a model won't train in real time, run a pre-trained demo and play back the logs. If the cluster's overheating, reroute metrics to a dummy server. If you're asked about performance, blame the dataset or the client's API, never the system. This culture of deception doesn't come from laziness. It comes from fear. Speaking out against Huawei's AI systems is seen as subversive. Criticizing the hardware is damaging national morale. Raising concerns about software bugs gets labeled as collaboration with foreign narratives. One engineer was blacklisted after a private group chat leaked. His offense? Calling CloudMatrix a stitched-together bomb. Now he works freelance. Remote jobs only. No ID tied to his code. The younger generation sees it too. Graduates fresh from Tsinghua, Zhejiang, or Beihang walk into AI roles with excitement, only to discover they're not building the future. They're propping up a failed present. Interns are handed Huawei stack documents from 2021, filled with broken links and deprecated commands. Most are never updated. Some are clearly copied from open-source Western projects, with variables still in English. Morale is low, burnout is high, and silence is everywhere. In 2025, a quiet exodus began. Skilled engineers started applying abroad, not loudly but steadily. Canada, Singapore, Germany, even India. Anywhere but here, one of them said. Anywhere I can actually solve problems. But most stay, not out of loyalty, out of necessity. Their mortgages tie them to Tier 1 cities. Their hukou blocks them from moving freely. Their employers remind them, you're not just coding, you're serving the nation. So they serve, and suffer, and comply. Meanwhile, official Huawei recruitment videos continue to broadcast glossy clips of engineers in spotless labs, smiling at glowing servers. The music swells. A narrator speaks. Together, we build the future. But inside the real server rooms, the engineers aren't smiling. They're patching the same memory leak for the third time. They're working weekends to rewrite failing scripts. They're checking their backs before speaking the truth. And somewhere deep down, they all know the same thing. The emperor isn't just wearing invisible clothes. He's making them sew it. In a second-tier city in Hunan province, a newly built AI innovation park stands empty. The glass walls reflect the gray sky. Inside, hallways echo under flickering lights. A Huawei CloudMatrix cluster sits in the center, powered on, idle, guarded. It was built with pride, funded by local government, promoted in state media as a symbol of China's unstoppable tech momentum. But today, the only sound is the low hum of wasted electricity. Outside, the people who paid for it walk past without looking. A few blocks away, a public health clinic has closed its weekend hours. Budget constraints, they say. In truth, its funding was redirected toward supporting indigenous computing infrastructure. This is how the illusion of Huawei's triumph touches daily life. Not through apps or services or tools that make things easier, but through cuts, through delays, through absence. In 2024, multiple provinces quietly froze spending on school upgrades and rural internet expansions. The funds went to Huawei-based cloud systems, many of which still sit underused or non-functional. But questioning the allocation, not allowed. To say the system doesn't work is to imply something worse, that the story doesn't hold. And the story is sacred. State media continues to broadcast victories. Drone footage of server farms, tech expos showcasing blinking machines, speeches about breaking through the Western blockade. But for ordinary people, none of this feels real. On social media, mentions of CloudMatrix crash, Ascend overheating, or AI failure are shadow banned. Entire discussions vanish overnight. Forums like Zhihu delete posts within minutes. Private WeChat groups resort to code. Red chips for Huawei. White elephants for government-backed tech projects that do nothing. The censorship is surgical, not loud, just quiet, like a hand closing over a mouth in the dark. But the public sees it anyway. They see the power outages. They see the rising taxes. They see the jobs that disappeared while state funds went to machines no one uses. And beneath the silence, frustration builds. A restaurant owner in Xi'an pays 12% more for electricity in 2025 than the year before. She doesn't know why, but she's heard the rumors about the data center up the road that runs non-stop for a national AI experiment. A retired teacher in Hebei loses access to subsidized medication. His clinic was downgraded from Tier 2 to Tier 3. The official reason? Budget reallocation to digital modernization. He doesn't ask questions, but he watches the news. He sees the headlines, and he feels the disconnect. How can a country leading in AI not fix a broken elevator in a public housing block. In 2025, a leaked survey from a Shanghai research firm showed a startling number. Only 27% of respondents believed domestic AI had improved their lives. But the survey never aired. The agency behind it was shut down a month later. This is the paradox of China's tech theater. A trillion-yuan machine that doesn't move society forward. A spectacle designed for belief, not function. And the belief is wearing thin. University students learn code on Western frameworks, then are told to deploy on Huawei clusters that crash during testing. Rural communities wait for broadband while funds go to underused AI parks. Doctors trust their eyes over diagnostic systems powered by lagging Chinese chips. The illusion cracks in 1,000 small ways. Unannounced, unrecorded, but unmistakable. Even among the loyal, there's a quiet shift. A project manager in Wuhan says, "I don't care if the chip is American or Chinese. I care if it works." A network engineer in Yunnan writes anonymous posts on GitHub under a VPN. He calls China's AI story a skyscraper without elevators. A university professor in Beijing tells his students, "Code like you're being watched. Think like you're still free." In an age where data should empower, China's AI illusion does the opposite. It silences, it distorts, it isolates, and in the center of that illusion stands a machine. Not smarter, not faster, just louder, built to be seen, not to solve. The emperor walks among the people, and they say nothing, not because they believe in the clothes, but because they remember what happened to the last person who laughed. The server hums, the lights stay on, the story continues. Huawei's CloudMatrix 384 was never about performance. It was never about solving problems. It was about walking proudly, draped in code that doesn't compile, powered by chips made elsewhere, wrapped in slogans printed at home. And in this fable, the emperor never hears the child shout. Because no one dares to speak. Because truth in this system is not just unwelcome, it's dangerous. The workers know. The companies know. Even the system knows. But the illusion marches on. Because in China, failure can be forgiven. But embarrassment cannot. So what happens when a nation invests more in the story than the solution? What happens when the code stops running, but the cameras keep rolling?